In the village of Zamba, tradition dictated that every girl wore beads from birth, designed to shape their waists into tiny forms that were considered the epitome of beauty. The tighter the beads, the more admiration a girl received. This belief had been passed down through generations, with mothers tightening their daughters' beads every year, ensuring their waists remained small and defined. As the dance of the beads approached, excitement filled the village. This annual celebration was the moment where every girl would showcase her waist, dancing before the village elders in hopes of being crowned the most elegant. For weeks leading up to the event, the girls prepared tirelessly. Each morning, they tightened their colorful waist beads until they could barely breathe, and their mothers inspected them with scrutinizing eyes, ensuring their waists were as small as possible. The girls applied fragrant oils to their skin, making it glow in the sun. They rehearsed their dance moves, twirling in front of their mirrors and imagining the praise they would receive. Mara, one of the girls, stood at the edge of her home, nervously tugging at her beads. Despite all her efforts, her waist never quite fit the ideal. The other girls often whispered behind her back, mocking her for being larger. That morning, as Mara adjusted her beads, she overheard them talking again, saying she would never win and that she should hide herself from the celebration. The words pierced her heart, and as she stood alone, her eyes filled with shame. She had tried everything, tightening the beads to the point of pain, using extra rows of them to push her waist into submission, but nothing seemed to work. Kenaya watched from a distance. She, unlike the others, refused to wear beads. From an early age, Kenaya had resisted the practice, believing that a girl's worth should not be defined by the size of her waist. Her mother, Amani, had always supported her, though the village whispered about their defiance. Kenaya had seen how the other girls struggled, how the beads cut into their skin and left them aching. She had heard the cruel words spoken about Mara and others who didn't fit the mold of beauty. And today, she was determined to make a stand. As the day of the celebration dawned, the village square buzzed with energy. The girls, dressed in bright garments of yellow, red, and blue, gathered with their families, their waists wrapped tightly in beads that shimmered in the sunlight. The elders sat in their places of honor, ready to judge the girls' elegance and poise. The girls moved gracefully, though their steps were restrained by the pain of their constricting beads. When Mara stepped forward, her face was pale, and she struggled to keep up with the other girls. The murmurs started immediately, with some spectators mocking her larger waist. As Mara danced, the ridicule grew louder, and she faltered, nearly stumbling in her discomfort. Her beads had been tied so tightly that her skin was red and raw, and every movement brought her pain. The shame of being ridiculed washed over her, and she was on the verge of giving up. But Kenaya could not stand idly by. She stepped forward, walking past the other girls, her waist unbound by beads. Without a word, she took Mara's hand, pulling her into a different kind of dance. Kenaya moved with freedom and ease, her steps light and graceful. Together, they danced before the elders, a stark contrast to the rigid, painful movements of the other girls. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Kenaya's dance carried a message they had never considered, that beauty was not something bound by tradition or shaped by pain. Her movements flowed like water, uninhibited, showing that grace came from within, not from the size of a waist. The elders exchanged uncertain glances. This was not the kind of beauty they had been taught to value, yet they could not deny the power of what they had seen. As the dance ended, Kenaya stood tall, unashamed, her simple dress flowing freely in the breeze. Mara, once shamed and ridiculed, smiled for the first time that day, feeling the weight of judgment lift from her shoulders. As the whispers died down, something changed in the crowd. Mothers began to loosen the beads around their daughters' waists, letting them breathe for the first time in years. One by one, the girls followed suit, untying the beads that had defined them for so long. The painful marks left by the beads began to fade, and in their place, a new sense of freedom emerged. In the days that followed, the tradition of the waist beads slowly faded. The dance of the beads became a different celebration, no longer about the smallest waist, but about the strength, wisdom, and individuality of the girls. Kenaya had brought about change, not through rebellion, but by showing her village that beauty did not lie in beads or the size of a waist, it lay in the freedom to be oneself. And so, the beads, once a symbol of pride, were now remembered as the beads of shame, a reminder of how the village had once tied beauty to something as fragile as a waistline. Thanks to Kenaya's courage, Zamba learned to celebrate the true elegance that came from within.